morning. Happy Friday. Happy Creative Mornings. Thank you for the introduction and for having me here today. A lot of you I know from the AIG Arizona and Phoenix Design Week world. So I'm just going to start by saying this is super weird being on the other side of it. Not planning speakers, but speaking. But I'm going to jump right in with a cringe warning. If I had visual aids, there'd be a big warning sign that said buzzword ahead, because I know creatives love to hate a good buzzword, but I'm going to do it anyway. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is alive and well. It did not die over the last 3 years while we were tackling our fears and making side hustles and speaking. It's alive and well, and I have it big time. I have always wanted to do something like this. All of my time spent in event planning, I wanted to be on the other side and speak, but I was very hesitant to do so. I have a habit of thinking that whenever you do something like this, it's got to be like chock full of takeaways, inspiration to go back into your, creative professional life. Just, thanks, Jen. Gave me a whole list of things to do today. But I was drawn to this theme. When I saw they give you different options for the months that you can speak. And there were a few that right away I was like, nope, that's not me. But I was drawn to this one. So I was like, I got to just do it. I got to put my name in and commit to it, and then no going back. So I did. And I immediately started asking everyone else what I should do. Even though I had it in my head what I wanted to talk about almost instantly, I was like, let's talk to colleagues, friends, mentors. Everyone had a different take. The topic of truth was a hot topic. I've been in advertising for most of my career. So I had a lot of people that were like, oh, there's like, the truth in advertising direction. You could do that. That'd be cool. Given our political landscape could have had truth in lies in politics, decided real quick that was a bad idea. So especially this week, a little sensitive this week. We could have played a really fun game of like 2 truths and a lie for 45 minutes. Like that would have been kind of rad. And that Creative Mornings manifesto about truth was, when I read that, I was like, ooh, that's epic. There's so many things I could pull from that. That would be really inspirational. But I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to take a completely different approach. And you might think it's a little weird. You might be like, what does this have to do with creative? Or what does it have to do with truth? But I had a friend tell me that that's what makes Creative Mornings special. They give you one word, one topic. It's up to your interpretation. And hey, I am a little weird, so this will get weird. I thought about Creative Mornings of the past that I've attended, the ones that I really left feeling very connected to people and inspired. They were just telling their story, their life story, their experience. They had a level of realness and vulnerability. And that's what I want to do. So at the very least, you'll leave today knowing a little bit more about me. If we already know each other, you might learn something new. If we've never met, you might be like, ooh, she seems odd and wonderful, and I want to get to know her. Or you might be like, this bitch is crazy, couldn't even understand the assignment, so I'm going to steer clear of her. I hope for none of the last one, but I've made peace with it. So I said I was drawn to this theme almost instantly. Like the second I saw it, I was like, oh crap, I'm going to do that one. And it sounds weird to say, but the word itself, the word truth, has had a major, major impact on my life, literally my whole life since I was born. And I'll tell you why. I was raised very, very religious in a very, very strict religion. And I am going to stop and put a disclaimer on this. I am going to be talking a lot about religion this morning, but strictly my experience with a very specific religion. Like no blanket statements, no judgment on anyone's faith. I am not religious anymore. Happy to go into that with anyone who wants to talk about it later. But that's not what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to tell my story, my very specific experience. So I'm of the firm belief, live and let live. You do you. So I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. Is anybody like ultra familiar with that world beyond like they knock on your doors and don't celebrate holidays? Like, were you a part of it yourself? Oh, okay. I was like, oh, okay, crap, this could get real awkward. Okay, I kind of figured as such. A lot of people know like the basic gist. They're out there. People know about them. But that religion, like most organizations, has an internal vernacular, like terminology for things. That's quite different from other Christianity-based religions. They are Christian-based. Things like, they don't call it going to church, it's going to meetings. They don't call them churches, they call them kingdom halls. The knocking on your door, the preaching, that's called going in service. There are multiple levels of that, like from just regular all the way up to like a full-time job. But the biggest one, the most important one, what they called the religion internally, like what it was referred to each other, was the truth. It was called the truth. If you were brought into it as that we brought someone into the truth, we have to go teach them the truth. That person left the truth. That was how it was referred to. And I mean, give it up to them for like ballsy branding right out the gate. You start a religion and you're like, we're the one and only truth. I'm like, okay. But I was a part of that religion for 20 plus years. So as you can imagine, word itself kind of beaten in my head for as long as I can remember. And then take that a step further, I had a very, very complicated relationship with the actual truth for a very long time, because I was being told that there was this only one true way to live. And there really was no questioning that. You weren't supposed to question it. Because of this upbringing and being in that type of religion, I didn't realize for a really long time that there are different types of truth. There are so many different ones. I won't go into all of them. But today, I'm really going to focus on that relationship between a universal truth and a subjective truth. That's those undeniable facts. They are proven in physicality versus a personal belief system, basically, like something I believe in this moment to be true. There are actually very few universal facts, very few. Most of them are like mathematic or scientific. 1 + 1 = 2. No one can dispute that. The earth revolves around the sun. There's some debate again about what shape the earth is apparently, but we can't deny that it revolves around the sun. Sun sets in the west, that's another one. Water is essential to live. Again, I feel like someone's going to try and argue that, but like we know water is essential to live. And then there's subjective truths. Many, many, many more of those. Everyone has an infinite amount of those. They can be positive. They can be your, internal guiding light. They can be affirmations that you tell yourself. Manifesting is really big. Just that positivity that you keep inward or put outward in times of stress. Those are all positive subjective truths that we live by. But today I'm going to talk a lot about the reverse, the negative ones, because I, for as long as I can remember, was taking my subjective truths that I was living by and putting them out or internalizing them as if they were universal, as if they were facts that everyone should believe and they cannot be changed. And that's a problem. Clinging to any kind of personal truth like that, when it's anything but, can become a real problem. You might have different terms for what I'm talking about. That's why I said it might get a little weird. You're going to be like, well, where do I connect this to truth? Some people call it like their inner voice, their inner dialogue, inner critic. It's a buzzword, another buzzword. Some people call them lies that you tell yourself in a moment of stress or insecurity. You'll notice I won't use the word lies a lot today. I think that discredits a feeling, what I'm talking about. But stay with me here. Because that word truth was beaten into my head from a very, very young age, I have always considered my inner dialogue, my inner voice, to be the truth, my inner truth. That is what I've called it, even when it's not. So what are some examples of this? Some inner truths that I, at some moment in my life, clung to. I will keep these to like career related. I'm not talented enough. I'm not talented enough to work at that company, to be on that team, to be on that project. That was a big one. I have to know and have done every aspect of every position on my team in order to lead it. Otherwise, nobody will take me serious. That was another one I've had for a very long time. And one that I used to live by very religiously, and luckily do not anymore, is being phony, being very polished, is required in all work settings. Nobody cares about the real you. Keep that shit inside. Those are just career related. Like I said, we will not be jumping into my personal inner truths. We will be here until next month, and some of you will need therapy, I promise. So, but you see how these are not facts. These are not universal facts. They're opinions. They're rather harsh opinions that I would tell myself. Definitely coping mechanisms in a time of like insecurity or turmoil. But you see how they start to become problematic, right? That's really bad for the psyche, to just be living that way as if it were truth. So back to this religion that I was raised in. It was very, very strict. It's a very sheltered way of life. And life revolved around it. It was meant to revolve around it. And I don't mean in the typical way that, you should pray and read your Bible and go to church on Sundays. I mean, like physically, your life revolved around it. From the earliest age that you could comprehend words, you were studying not only the Bible, but their entire like library of publications so that you could get baptized, and start going in service, because the ultimate goal is to bring other people into this religion. Remember, it's the one and only truth. If you're not in it, you're doomed. So the goal was to get more people into it. They went to meetings. They're, going to church like 3-4 times a week on top of their other study. Service was meant to be done multiple times a week. And like I said, started from just like 15 hours a month all the way to basically a part-time job. There were conventions that you attended a couple times a year in different states. There was, and then you start to take into consideration the lifestyle. A big one I think a lot of people probably know about this religion is they don't associate with anyone outside of it. So you're not supposed to have friends at school or work or anything like that. So you only have this kind of small community that you don't really have a choice of who's in it, which really sucks because a lot of people in it are not very nice. But this is all, again, under the guise of truth. This is the truth. Going against it would be bad. Questioning it would be very bad. And the irony in all of this, the utmost irony, is that while I was living as an adolescent, a teenager, and into my early 20s in something called the truth, I was the most dishonest version of myself that I've ever been. I was living a double life. I had friends at school because I didn't really feel like I was on board with what was being taught about how they were bad and you should stay away from them. I wanted to go to dances and be a part of, I was in dance crew and stuff like that. You weren't supposed to do that. I had a boyfriend. You weren't supposed to have a boyfriend unless you were of marrying age. He was actually also a Jehovah's Witness, but he was interpreting the belief system a little bit different, which led to a lot of control and emotional abuse. So I was in an emotional, abusive relationship from a very, very young age. So then I started lying to him. I don't know if at this point it's like a triple life, because it's like double life from the religion and then lying to him. I don't know. I lost track, but it was bad. It was dishonest. It was a lot of turmoil in my brain. Let me put it to you that way. And through all of this, I had no idea what the truth was. I had no idea if what I was being taught by the religion was the truth. I didn't know who my true self was. This dichotomy of a world supposedly surrounded by truth and light, and then living a very dishonest life on a daily basis, just really fucks with a person, especially at 14 years old. And that's when a lot of this kind of really came to a head, when I was a teenager. But that all around lack of normalcy was probably the worst part. I mentioned it was very strict, very sheltered. A big one was you were not supposed to have a career. You were supposed to have a job, find a way to get a job so that you could immediately start going in service. That was the most important part. But that meant no college, no extra education. Education was for rebels. Some people still did it, but it was really, really frowned upon. But luckily, vocational schools were really popular in this way. They wanted you to go and learn how you could be a bookkeeper or a receptionist or something 9 to 5, so you could spend all the rest of your time in service. So I opted for that. I was like, okay, cool, I'll go to one of those. What they did not account for was vocational schools also have creative programs that you can take. So you get an option. You're like, take 2 or 3 of these and see which one you like, and then you can commit to one. So I tried culinary arts and animation. And I could be like, the rest is history, guys. That's my story. Bye. But that was my first taste of taking a foot out of this religion. No one really understood why I was doing that. You can't get a 9 to 5 job from that. We all know that. But I'd always been creative, so I wanted to go down that route. And while living this double life and now doing something extra that everyone was mad at me about, I wasn't great. Didn't always feel great, but it did have me starting to think for myself. Up until this point, I did not. I was just, I was a parrot, whatever anyone told me to do. And then maybe I would go to school and be myself for 5 minutes that day. But I started to think for myself a little bit. I started to break a few rules, which, again, the rest is history. If anyone knows me, now I question everything and I break all the rules. So go me. Fast forward, we're going to do a time jump in the movie of Jenn, because I did finally leave that religion around 23 years old. And I did what people who leave a religion do and had a little bit of a selfish phase and a crazy phase. And we're going to skip right over that because admittedly, it was not great. I didn't go right in the right direction right away. But eventually I did learn a mantra that I still live by now, something I was not doing up until this point in my mid-20s. And that's to just be a good person for the sake of being a good person. Not because I was afraid that I was going to lose my boyfriend or get kicked out of the congregation, or what their belief system is on the afterlife, not because of fear or embarrassment, but just to be a good person. It's a no-brainer, right? So I felt like I was successfully making a shift. My mind went from living around this dishonest truth. I know that's an oxymoron, but I was raised around this this truth that was very dishonest, to something that started to feel a little bit more authentic. I didn't end up going to college, started my career, obviously. Side note, I was working 24/7, so I completely understand why they don't want you to get a job like that, because where the heck was I going to have time to go knocking on doors and to meetings 4 times a week? So I get it now. But amidst working 24/7, I did start to have a little bit of a social life. I started to make real, true friends that I didn't have to hide in the background. I met my best friend at that agency that I was working at. So it was an improvement. I was making an improvement. But now that I could think for myself for the first time in 24 years, I went a little extreme in the other direction. Viewing my inner thoughts, again, bringing this kind of back to as universal. Basically, you have stifled me for long enough, and now my thoughts are my own, and they are the truth. They're the only truth. You can't convince me otherwise. In other words, I was a really judgmental bitch for like 2 years. So not great either, but it was an improvement. At least it was a little bit more authentic. After all this, I started to kind of find myself a little bit more. I met a guy, or I reconnected with a guy who had a life just polar opposite to mine. He was in the military, which was another thing you avoid as a Jehovah's Witness. You're supposed to be politically neutral, no involvement in the military world. P.S. It is Veterans Day, so if we have any, thank you for your service. I was a part of that world for a little while. But yeah, so I was very intrigued by this life that he offered, and kind of jumped headfirst without thinking into that. I got married. I moved away from my hometown of Vegas, which I never thought I would do. Started traveling, started my own design business, which took off very quickly. It was really successful, really fast. So I was experiencing things that I never thought I would, and I thought I had made it. I was a part of a power couple. We were swimming in money, no kids, just doing whatever we wanted. Life was perfect. And I would tell anyone that life was perfect and I had found my true self. Jenn has found her true self. Does anyone think that that was true? Spoiler, no, false. Jenn had not found her true self. And that became evident in 2018 when my life flipped completely upside down, fell apart. That seemingly perfect marriage ended very abruptly and seemingly for no reason. So it's kind of hard to reconcile with that. I couldn't immediately find a new place to live because my work wasn't treated as steady. It was my personal business was basically freelance to the outside world. I couldn't find a different type of job because they were viewing that time on my business as a career gap, which I'm very happy that there's a shift being made in the industry with that. But at the time, it was still pretty bad. Just countless interviews and resumes unanswered. And all the while mentally being forced to face that all of these truths I had been clinging to, this time what I thought were positive truths. Like, I don't have to do anything different. I've made it. That's it. These are my truths. I'm going to cling to them. I wasn't growing. I was forced to reconcile with those. The negative truths started to creep back in. I had to fight things like, wow, you were really stupid for not seeing that coming. You're going to have to tuck your tail between your legs and run back home to Vegas and live with mom. And you're for sure going to have to give up your business, and that's going to be viewed as a failure just by everybody. But something interesting also started to happen at this time. I couldn't exactly tell you why. I did start therapy around here, so maybe that helped. But I also think that the people around me had a lot to do with this. I started to notice, instead of these truths creeping in and staying there and sticking like they always had in the past, like can't convince me otherwise, I would at least take a moment and question them. I'd be like, is it though? Is it true? This was the first time I had a real support system. I thought I had one with the religion. Everyone thinks their, religious community is their support system. Mine was not. Very two-faced, very mean people. I thought I had it in like college, those friends that I had made, my family, but there was some toxicity there that I didn't learn about till later. But this time I had a real support system. So I started to notice what I'm calling a new type of inner truth. I have no idea if this is a real term. I'm going to pretend like I made it up. An evolving inner truth. One where I was learning to stop, reevaluate, and change them if I could. I can't always. But so, going back to those things I was telling myself, you were stupid for not seeing that coming. Maybe I was, but no one else saw it coming either. So wasn't going around calling everyone in my life stupid. There's something to be said there. Also, I'm a very pessimistic person. I am a realist. I am questioning everything all the time now. So the fact that I wasn't doing that in that relationship tells me that I felt safe and trusting, and I was loving hard with pure intentions. So the fact that I didn't see it coming meant that I had found a new level of myself that I had never had before. And I'm going to choose to lean on that being a great part of my personality that I can take into future relationships versus you were stupid, you should have seen that coming, and you should never trust or love again. So again, evolving truth. It's a little bit better for your mind. Was moving back to Vegas the only option? No, in fact, it was at the bottom of the list because I hate it there and I don't ever want to live there again. I had friends who took me in. I don't even remember how it went down, but I don't think I had to ask. They were just like, yeah, totally, come live with us. So, bonus, I got to experience roommates for the first time in my 30s, and that was super fun. They've yet to be able to get rid of me. I don't live there, but I still kind of live there. But so I had the time I needed to find a good job I eventually bought a house. I brought my dogs back. I built a new life. I, put my time into new things and started to build this life that I really cared about and felt really more authentic to me. And then the last one, giving up my business. Was that going to be a failure? I am absolutely convinced someone somewhere in the city thinks I'm a failure because I went from owning my own business to going back to an agency. I know the entrepreneur mindset. I had it for a long time. Like being your own boss is peak. So yeah, there's probably someone who thinks that. But as it turns out, that one was one of the furthest from the truth. I was always meant to be on a team, to be in an environment where I could grow and focus on the creative and do cool shit without having to hassle someone to pay their invoice for $100 logo that I made 6 months ago. So I got to get back on track in a professional sense in a way that I forgot I had lost. And also I got to evolve my freelance. I didn't have to get rid of it. I got to keep it and become, much more picky with what I took on. So now it's just truly a financial benefit versus a burden. So no, I don't think that was a failure. In all of this, I also found my community. I shouldn't say I found it. I was a part of it already. I was sitting on boards for AIG Arizona and Get Phoenix Young Professionals for a couple years at this point, but admittedly, I had joined them for the wrong reasons. Remember, I was part of Power Couple. Power couples join boards for stuff. That's what they do. So that's why I joined. But giant blessing in disguise because those people became my community. That's what led me to my job finally. That's what led me to some of my best friends still that I have today. And I threw myself hard into it. 2018 was also the year that I was director of Phoenix Design Week. And guess what kind of truths tried to creep in for that one? It's a volunteer experience. Just get rid of it. You don't need it. You're going to fail at this just like you failed at your marriage. That kind of stuff, real hard. But I was like, no, this is a wonderful challenge. These are wonderful people that are relying on me, and I'm going to stick it out. And to this day, it is I think one of the best things I've ever accomplished. Anyone who was there in 2018, that was Beyond Design was a totally awesome conference. So I'm glad I stuck that out and didn't listen to the truth that was in my head. So all of this to say, I promise that wasn't rambling. That was all very intentional. All of this is to say that finally in my 30s, which is quite sad to admit, I was starting to view my inner truths for what they are. They're subjective. They can be changed. They can evolve. So now I live a little bit more by this evolving truths mindset. Put my big girl pants on. I started doing a lot of hard mental and physical work on myself. And I still do that every day to make sure that I'm, not stifling myself by listening to things that are not true. I think the way all of us view the different types of truth affects everything around us, mainly relationships. Sticking to personal truths in things like politics or family dynamics or your work environment, it can start to get kind of detrimental. So we've talked a lot about the self, doing things to yourself with your inner thoughts, but think about how it starts happening outwardly. Think about your work environment. I'm pretty sure all of us have dealt with that person who their opinion is the only opinion that matters. Their idea is the best idea. They will not budge. They will not move. I'm not even going to say that they won't become successful. Unfortunately, the bad guys win and they always do become successful, but they're alone at the top. They are driven by ego. Nobody likes them. Sorry, I'm just going to say that. And I don't want to be that person. So yeah, maybe that's a successful route, but I don't ever want to be that person. I'm sure everyone here doesn't want to be that person. But so you see how, that starts to work outwardly. And then listen, sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's harmless and funny. I call it a good old fashioned spiral where truth just creeps in and you cling to it in a moment and you say it out loud and the people around you are like, what just happened? You know, my phone ding, you've been invited to so-and-so's party or whatever. And friend across me is like, I didn't get one. What that, is she mad at me? She's mad at me. She's mad at me because of the time that I was late to the other party and then I spilled wine on the floor and like, I know that's why. And then bing, her phone, she got the alert. You've been invited. Oh, yeah, that was hilarious to watch. Like, okay, awesome. Kind of harmless, but like, you see how quickly it happens and like, and yes, I may have reversed the roles in that a little bit and I am always the one on the other end having the spiral, but it's okay. Also, that was a little bit for you. And then sometimes it starts to wade into murkier waters. I think about like sharing things on social without like verifying that it's true. A lot of times we connect an inner truth with something we see, share it immediately, and that's that. But we know that misinformation spreads faster than regular information, so sometimes that becomes a little bit detrimental to the info that we're putting out in the world. I personally try not to share anything unless I'm just stating it's, it's part of my belief system or that I can verify it's true. And then taking it even further than that, where it starts to get outright dangerous, politicians are spewing absolute absurdities to the public. They're changing laws. They are ruining our lives, all based on basically personal truths, what they believe to be personally true, and they are forcing onto the world outside, and it's destroying us from the inside out. Also, really religious parents who start doing what I consider outright abuse when their kids don't comply with their belief system. A child comes out as gay or trans, and they're like, we don't believe in that. We're done with you. Best case scenario, that kid ends up with a new support system and has lost their family. But what we see more oftentimes, that gets way worse than that. They are ending up on the streets. They're turning to drugs. They are taking their own lives because the people who were supposed to love them no matter what chose not to over a belief system. You can see how, yes, it's very important to keep your inner truths in check, but it's extra important to be careful when they start becoming outward. So where does this end up? Where did I end up with this in my life today? Like, where am I at with it? I am not here to tell you that, oh my gosh, guys, I made it again. My life is perfect. I figured out all my evolving truths and now I live just like a perfect, mentally healthy life. Absolutely not, I promise. I fight them daily. Mine personally creep in fast. And I have a really hard time of like not clinging to them as universal truths still to this day. Things like I'm not as talented as my coworkers. I shouldn't be working on that. Yikes. Okay. One day these inner truths drive me. They are my motivation. Oh crap, I'm not talented to work on it. Bitch, challenge accepted. Yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna rock it. And it works. And then the next day they are a brick wall that I absolutely cannot get past. No convincing me otherwise. From a personal aspect, this gets a little bit more difficult. I do tend to say a lot of these out loud and I don't always love the reactions I get. So I try to keep more of them to myself. That's where therapy comes in handy. Having an unbiased person to talk to. I like to journal. My journal is basically all of my universal facts, just like word vomited on the page. So I can slam them shut and be like, okay, they still exist, but like, they're not going to affect me today. And at work, it's a little bit easier because I have awesome coworkers who I can just vent it out with. I'm like, they're either going to agree and validate my truth like immediately, or they're going to be like, Jen, this is a stretch, like calm down. So love you guys. I also learned many years ago that I have this interesting mix of creativity and business sense that isn't always the case in the creative world. I have this skill set. I can be a designer, and art director, creative director, but I also am very like fast and organized and meticulous and budget focused and all that, super sexy stuff. So I lean into that on my bad days. When I have one of those truths creep in and they're just like, oh, your creativity, you have no creativity, you suck at this, like give it to someone else. I lean into one of those tasks. I go fix someone's calendar or, join a meeting where we're just talking about organizational stuff. And it's just like harder for me to fail at those. So I can feel accomplished, I can feel successful, and I can tackle the creative stuff the next day. And then I just flat out learned to discredit old truths that I was living by, like the being phony. You got to be very like phony and buttoned up with everybody. Professional, yes, you should be professional in any given setting. But I firmly believe that authenticity matters way more than anything else. I actually live by that now. I say it all the time at work when we're strategizing, when people ask what's most important, I'm like, authenticity, you got to be authentic with it. And that has now become a huge part of my personal brand. You are getting the authentic, like name brand Jenn experience today. I cannot sit still. I have no idea how many curse words I've used. I apologize. Only two, cool, thanks. So, that was one of those evolving truths. Like I didn't have to live that way. I got to shift it. And now it's a really awesome part of my personality. And fun fact, authenticity is a synonym for truth. So look at that, we've come full circle. But it's a constant battle. Sometimes I fail. I fail a lot. I fail daily, but I am a better version of myself, for me, for my friends, for my team, when I have more of an evolving truths mindset versus that very like, no, what I believe is universal. It's fact, it's true, it's not going to change. So that's just a little glimpse of my story. I told you I was just going to tell my story today. So from this world revolving around something called the truth, but was anything but, to that polar opposite direction where, yes, things were happening in a little bit more of a positive light, but I was still like sticking to things too sternly, stagnant, compromising, not growing, to this ever evolving, messy, stubborn brat one day, like enlightened being the next, but genuinely most authentic version of myself that I've been so far. That's where I am. And I'm not done. The subjective truths, the inner truths, they still creep in, they plant themselves like they're universal. I am a work in progress. I probably will be forever. I think the absolute worst truth that any of us can convince ourselves of is that we're ever done becoming better versions of ourselves. We can always be better. We can always do better. So do you remember I said I struggled with takeaways? Everything should have like a very inspirational takeaway. This is where I would give you like 5 facts to go back into your life. And Jenn taught me to do this and it's amazing. That's because that was a universal truth in my head that I was sticking to for as long as I can remember. It stressed me out all the way up until like 45 minutes ago when I started talking. But I'm going to have to practice what I preach and disappoint you, or really disappoint myself with that. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to bring this full circle. I mentioned when I started talking that subjective truths can also be positive. They can be like your, core inner belief system. They can be the harmless, wonderful things that save you, uplift you, bring you happiness in a shitty, shitty world. There's 4. So I'm going to end with just sharing some of those of mine. They're just 5 Jenn laws. They are current Jenn law that I live by that make me happy. My hope is that you all have some of these, or maybe it sparks you to find some of your own. So they're going to just seem like random facts, random Jenn facts. Number 1, dogs are better than cats. I knew I was going to ruffle some feathers with that one. No, but really, my dogs are like basically the cutest creatures to exist ever. So I think that animals bring you a lot of joy. Pets bring you a lot of joy. If you can open your home to one, I highly recommend it. Number 2, popcorn and wine is a fully acceptable meal that can be eaten every single day. I did not say a healthy meal. I also am not pounding a bottle of wine and a bucket of popcorn every night, I promise. But I was taught in my time in therapy that these are called simple pleasures, just little like nuggets on your day that make you feel better, whatever that looks like. Could be a TV show, a movie, a pet. So that's mine. Bonus if I'm doing it while watching Friends, even better. 3, punching things makes everything better. I don't mean that I'm like putting holes through my wall at home. I'm referring to the actual sport of boxing, which I've been pretty much into for about 12 years. I recently got way more into it and it's so therapeutic. I think everyone should have a rage outlet if you don't already. Number 4, mental health matters. I will not put a funny spin on this. It is hard, it is ongoing, but it is so important. If you haven't noticed, I'm a bit of a feisty bitch and I don't let anyone bully me. So I do the hard work every day to make sure I'm not bullying myself. If I don't care what it looks like for you, but I hope you're taking care of your mental health, whatever that means. And then lastly, number 5, probably the biggest Jenn law today, friends are family and community is essential. This community has brought me connections, my job, some of my very best friends, truly unmatched experiences, and I am grateful for it every day. I truly appreciate all of you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I think I kicked imposter syndrome in the balls this morning, and I appreciate all of you guys for helping me do that. So, thank you.